Hey, how you doing? I wanted to get one over to you. This one's called "They Broke Her, You Bought Her," and it just goes with the saying, you probably didn't buy the woman that you're with. This is a video for men. This is probably more for men, but I'm sure, I don't know, women. A lot of women do watch my stuff, and less than in previous years, but they do get something out of it, and I do feel like I have a very loyal female fan base. So, but this is "They Broke Her, You Bought Her." And it is really just thinking through a bit, like the prospect of getting with a woman who has been abused, and basically all women have been abused. It's just to what degree, right? That's always the question. But you have to think about it, like there's also disparities in maturity between men and women, and it runs the gamut, really. I mean, you can have people that are 18 that are particularly mature for their age. You can have people that are 35, and there's a lot of this now, that are rather immature for their age. And there's almost a normalization going on because there are so many people now in their 30s and late 30s who are so immature. That seems to be the standard. But obviously, when the rubber meets the road and you're actually in the relationship with the other person, it can be a total disaster. So, this is in the vein of sort of preventing that. And if you want like a really deep dive on this, I have a new book. It just came out this year called Family Formation. I'll leave the link down below, and I think it's really well worth your perusal because the more we can dial in the family formation, the less problems there are later. And we owe it to our children to do it the right way. So they broke her. What do I mean by that? I mean, essentially, like you are like the prospect of getting with a woman, and I don't mean to add to more trepidation, right? Because there's so much trepidation already, and birth rates are just going down, because people are very discouraged. But you want to very, very much early on in the relationship, and I would say like within 2-3 dates, you're going to want to know her family history. You're going to want to know her childhood history. You're going to want to know her parents' values. And a lot of this can run the other way. I think that if you're a woman and you're watching this, you got to think, how was this man raised? What were the major events in this person's upbringing, positive and negative? And in the early going, you don't need to know everything, but you need to know what is pertinent to your continuing to be in the relationship, and to know if there's going to be some major problems down the line. And so let's say, for example, like there was a heavy medication. Like you get with this woman, and she was heavily medicated as a child. What does that mean? Well, in my experience, it means that she has gone through, however long she was on the medication, she was, how do we put it, less in contact with reality. And so there was a lack of emotional attachment that happened in this time, and it will lead to increased immaturity down the line. And it also, the psychiatric drugs, they dampen socialization. That's another way of looking at what I just said. And so when you're with this person, you have to wonder, like, did they have fun as a kid? And they may have not had fun. And so, and you may be the same, and then that's like something you both need to address together. And there's good fun, there's bad fun, right? I think we all know what the bad fun is. The good fun, I think, is harder for people to know what it is because it's just not taught in the schools. It's not commonly talked about. I had a video up once upon a time on my old YouTube channel that got banned called Taking Healthy Risks. And that did have to do with the good kind of fun. But good kind of fun. I mean, if there was an absence of socialization or a lack of contextualization with socialization because of a heavy drugging or even a minor drugging, then that is a deficit from childhood that ideally should be addressed in adulthood. So this means that, if you get someone that was, we'll just say, we don't have to say heavily drugged as a kid, but let's just say really isolated, they were really rejected and neglected by their parents, then they are going to be missing out. They're going to miss some of those, stabilizing muscles. They're going to miss some of the fine tuning in terms of like just going out and talking to people. And depending on how late they are into adulthood, that ship may have sailed. And so this person could be kind of odd, and they could be set in their preferences. It can now, a person can be totally set in their preferences because they were hyper involved socially. They were aggressed against. They had a very active sort of meddling going on with them. Some of it good, right? Some of it good. Some of it very destructive. And so they can come into adulthood with a really strong certainty because they've had a strong cultural background, whatever that might be. And so then they can come in with really strong preferences into adulthood, and then they're off in their socialization because they assume that, you know, some things work the way that they work when they don't. And you see this a lot with people who are LDS or ex-LDS. You know, then the only real ex-LDS sort of oasis for them is Reddit. And so they sort of adapt their socialization, their preferences, and their expectations to like a liberal worldview, which is is very problematic, and it's not worth doing. There are not a lot of like ex-LDS resources that are Catholic or Presbyterian or Baptist, for example. So, and you know, these denominations don't want that smoke, and so anyway, that's a whole thing, and it's not really the point of this video. But yeah, you can come in, and also people who are like, something also to think about with people who are rejected a lot, neglected a lot, and put on drugs, which is a form of rejection, is a rejection of the child's true self, is that oftentimes they will have a low enthusiasm because they've kind of withered on the vine. And so, you know, this is all born out of parental rejection. This is all born out of like the conclusions that a parent entertains in their mind about their child. And this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. You don't want to parent with conclusions. You want to parent with curiosity. Now, the people that are having kids now, I mean, most of these people now were born in the 90s, you know. So the parenting wasn't the best. The parenting really hasn't been any good until about 10 years ago. And you know, we could stretch that out over history and go, yeah, okay, well, European Middle Ages, you know, parenting was far and away superior to the parenting of all the rest of the planet, and I would grant you that, you know. And so, relatively speaking, the parenting of the 20th century exceeded the parenting of the 19th century. It was not without its problems, because a lot of people say, well, we need to revert back to the 19th century, and you know, because all the political problems, basically because the political institutions that are now destroying everybody's lives took root in the 20th century. And so there's a disconnect there for a lot of intellectuals. They can't tie that back to the family. But by and large, parenting really has only been like good to decent in the last 10, 15 years. I'd say maybe 15 years since I became a parent. Since the day I became a parent, then parenting, then it was acceptable. So anyway, you're going to want to learn, like, in the less mastery you have, like, this is why I always emphasize self-knowledge, and I have ever since I decided to start speaking publicly, which was in 2013. I mean, I used to speak publicly at like shows and stuff, and I would talk about my passions and my interests. But since I started a YouTube and speaking on YouTube, I started my YouTube in 2006. I just put up a few music videos here and there. But in 2013, my first video was on self-knowledge. And the less of a grasp you have on these dynamics and what the implications are, right? Because you can learn the information, and you can even be like, you can be a low sensitivity person because you just had a lot of rejection, isolation in your background, and then you'll learn the relevant facts and you'll be like, but that's also a you issue, right? That's not like, okay, so you're not really put out by something major that happened with somebody else. That's not exactly healthy, you know. That's not exactly, just because you're not inconvenienced doesn't mean that that's fine. And I think a lot of people I know that a lot of people live in that because they have such a reduced sensitivity. I just posted this thing on Telegram that I thought was a banger. I said that people are just tend not to take note of the things that they say, how that cuts them off from their true feelings. So people can become really desensitized, really armored. They can live in a perpetual state of fight or flight, perpetual state of, what do we call it, like persecution and victimhood. And so then when they learn the relevant facts about somebody else, they are so stressed out that it's, if anything, it's just to exploit them or it's to get away from the other person. That's why they collect their information. But you're collecting in order to connect in this early going. They broke it, you bought it. You bought the farm, you're signing on, you're committing to this woman, you need to know. I could talk about red flags, I could talk about, the sort of gossipy side of things, but I just wanted to focus on that family history component. It's so crucial. I mean, there are other questions you need to know. There are other things you need to know. You need to know body count. You need to know dating history. A lot of things you can, if you're reasonably empathetic, you can look at a person and know within a couple of minutes. But you need to know educational background, friends, like socialization. How was that for you? Obviously, you need to know health. A lot of people forget about that. They skip over the health question, and then it turns out the person had dodgy health. Or maybe you know up front, and maybe your medical knowledge isn't that great, and maybe you're just not properly calibrated there, and so maybe you're overly daunted when something is a little bit minimal, and so you'll be sort of rejecting the person. Or maybe they've got a real big issue, and you just don't know hide nor hair how to deal with that. Or in a very rare case, maybe you have a lot of medical knowledge, and you can you're not too intimidated by that. So a lot of this depends on you too. Like, you can learn the information. I mean, a wonderful thing, I had a couple thoughts there, so I'll just jump into one of them. A wonderful thing about dating in the boomer generation was that everybody was in a very close bandwidth. The continuum was very tight. And now, because of multiculturalism, because of the failure of the institutions, because of the rampaging of the left, the denuding of the currency, so on and so forth, the spectrum is huge. I mean, you just have extremes. You have all sorts of. It isn't really on one line anymore. It's multidimensional, and you have like crazy mind-altering drugs even that can be added in there, and it just pushes people off in a la la land. And then people can have their right, because they start paying taxes in their 30s, like most people anyway, because we have like a failure to launch economy essentially, and people start paying their taxes in their 30s, and then they have all this accumulated damage from their 20s, all their hedonism, and it's like they haven't embodied a person. They haven't embodied the personhood of someone that was living a good, clean, judicious life in their 20s. And that is if a person becomes self-aware of that, like, that's very, very hard for a person to overcome. And so usually what they'll do, instead of like feel that through and work it out, and it takes a lot of work, maybe for the sake of expediency, and honestly, most of it is, I wouldn't even say it that way. Most of it is just laziness, honestly, because there's so many free hours in a day. People don't work like they did in the 70s. Like, people don't really work like they did it when things were more functional. I mean, gosh, I salivate when I think of some of these stories I've read of these businessmen and stuff that cut their teeth in the 70s. Like, I salivate for that environment. But let's be real, a lot of people are really becoming work averse, and then of course the elite are just promising UBI, and so people just are kind of lazy. And so really, then there's a defense in there, because a person has a self-realization of what they've done with their 20s, but they can't measure. They don't want to measure up to the mark because they don't want to do the work, and they want to find some shortcut. And I think that is very, very difficult, especially for people who are dating in their 30s, to feel motivated to want to make up for lost time. And so oftentimes, for a man, it's like he'll just get a much younger woman who is blind to all this, blind to his corruption, blind to how, and people don't change without self-knowledge. So someone can straight up, and there's many people that are very angry when I say that, but people don't change without self-knowledge. I mean, people only change through self-knowledge. That's how I want to say it. And so, and it can be primitive for people, and it can be like their own little personal religion, but they can make traction that way. But by and large, people without self-knowledge and not exposed to philosophy, they don't really fundamentally change. And so then that's in there, that's in them. And so they choose people that are naive. So they become even more predatorial. And this is something I wrote about. I believe I wrote, this gets a little bit into the territory of men with high body counts, which is a chapter in my book, Family Formation. But the work is doable. I mean, I'm always available for a consultation. If you want to go to my website, stephenfranson.com, you can drop me a line there, Steve Franson at protonmail.com. The work it's possible to do. I mean, it's extremely rewarding too. It's not like this huge chore. I think people sort of confuse, maybe, I have like a sense of humor and I'm sort of like doom-pilled about economics and like government basically. And so people confuse this outlook with like the fruits of self-knowledge or something like this. But I mean, you can take your life any which way you want, and you can cultivate any attitude that you would like. But if you do it with more empathy, more insight into yourself, and then ultimately that you can turn that around for others. You can run it however you like, people used to get on my case because I was changing my stripes every year or year and a half. People used to get on they used to complain about this in various places. Oh, this guy, he can't decide. But it's like, well, I'm intellectually open. Like I'm just learning all the time and I'm changing all the time. So this inevitably expresses itself. So I'm in my current iteration. 2026, I think I'll be even a lot healthier than I am now. I'm starting to have good days. Like I said in my last video, I'm starting to have good days. And so, what you see isn't exactly what you get. Like you can do it. You can turn into any sort of ideal that you would like. And that's in the raw fundamentals of philosophy and self-knowledge. And I am trying to sort of get back at that stuff. I did write a book called Make Self-Knowledge Great Again that covered a lot of that. But in my opinion, now that book is cash money, like anybody should get it. But from where I'm sitting now, I'm going, that needs a lot of updating. And so a part of my hope with this YouTube channel is to be able to stay on so that I can sort of speak more at length about a lot of the things I've learned and figured out and sort of added to the canon in the last, whatever it's been, like, I think it's been 8 or 9 years since I published that book. So I want to get this information over to you. Some of it's going to make it into books. Some of it's going to be sort of explored philosophically in novels. I mean, I've been sitting on a grand ambition and just not having the generative power, the physical health power to be able to get it out to you. So, but I think that is changing anyway. Well, this is something to think about. And then I'll say one more thing too, because, and I wrote about this in Family Formation, or maybe I put it in a recent Substack. I got a lot of resources for you. Maybe this is even like this isn't an essay that hasn't made it to a book yet. I did write it this year, but what parents will do is, in order to hold on to their child, they will cripple their child, and they will obligate their child in all these different ways. And if the child, there's many power games that can happen, because if the child wants sanction, knows their parents are corrupt, but they want the sanction anyway. I mean, that's like we're starting to go in. We're going into sociopathy territory. Like a person who can't let go of the corruption of their parents for the sake of good arguments and for good attachment with the next generation, their spouse, and this is both men and women. There is a coldness in there. There's a callousness in there. And it's important to watch out for that in the early going. Like someone who like really idealizes their parents and can't look at their parents in a critical way. And people are really scared of doing that. They are often hiding a lot of things, and it looks harmless on the outside. Or if you see them interact with their peers, or you see even someone maybe on some rare shot over the moon like chance actually confront them on this, they will have their certainty or whatever. They'll have their panache, their charisma, their way of handling it that they learned from their parents. They'll do this to your face, but then when you get behind closed doors with them, that's when the real nightmare starts. And it's you know, an inability to be critical of one's parents. Ultimately, like, that's a standard. And standards, we run our standards universally, and so that turns into an inability to criticize oneself. You know, using arguments, right? I think that the left always has championed self-criticism, but it's like according to an ideology, right? But healthy self-criticism is literally like, do you have a killer argument? Does it apply to you? Do you feel resistance to that? Get curious about that. You know, that's healthy self-criticism. So I think I'll leave you with that. There's just so much more that I could say. But I want to entice you to stick around. I want to entice you to click the links down below. Leave them wanting more. Smash the thumbs up. Thanks for being with me. I would appreciate it if you picked up my copy of my book, Family Formation. I got some really great stuff cooking. It's just been, you know, waiting on the gears to start turning physically. So, so I appreciate you being with me. And Christmas is right around the corner. I'll have a few more videos up to you soon. Leave a comment down below if you liked it. Get behind the paywall. I'll see you.